All right, everybody, let's hope this works here. Using a backup camera here. Quick review on the Byzantine Empire. Byzantine Empire is going to be headquartered over here in Constantinople, with the halfway point being Greece. And what had happened, the Great Roman Empire is going to fall. The massive empire that controlled parts of 3 continents, Africa, Europe, and Asia, is going to collapse in the West in 476. The power then lie in the great eastern city in what is today Turkey, in Constantinople, right here. It is known sometimes as the Byzantine or the Eastern Empire, the eastern half of the Roman Empire, and it sits right here on this body of water, kind of on the Bosphorus, going between the Black Sea and the Mediterranean Aegean Sea. And so Constantinople is attractive for several reasons. Number one, it is very safe. It is surrounded on 3 sides by bodies of water and high mountains. So it's extremely difficult to defend, especially from the barbarians who were coming into the western part of the empire, who were not great sailors at this time. Also, many of the educated people and the wealthy people from Rome left Rome and moved over to Constantinople. Part of it was for safety, part of it was for education, but a lot of it had to do about making money. It was still connected to the various trade routes. The main branch of the Silk Road, plus the gold salt route coming out of Africa, and even the spice route coming out of India, are all going to meet in Constantinople. So over time, emperors are going to build up the defenses to make the city difficult to capture. And so it is often felt that the Byzantine Empire isn't a separate empire of its own. It is an extension of the old Roman Empire. Rome had done all the heavy lifting with the central government and building the roads and the bridges, so the Byzantine Empire just had to keep things rolling. However, it is its own separate empire. And much like old ancient Rome, it kept a lot of the things that work. Remember, Emperor Constantine, and Diocletian, who divided the empire, and Constantine, who later reconnected it, made sure that they were seen as the old Roman emperors. So we have the strong centralized governmental system where the emperor in Constantinople has absolute power, just like the old Roman rulers. But we're going to talk about this more later on, where in the West, church and state are staunchly separated. Similar to the growing Islamic Empire that's going to show up soon, the emperors of the Byzantine Empire combined both church and state. The church was part of the governing bureaucracy, or its own separate ministry. And so with the emperor being head of the church, I used the example in class, it was very easy for him to help control the minds and the hearts of the people to unite the empire, because he controlled the religion as well. When life was at its most difficult, a lot of people were looking towards the church. So, now being the Byzantine emperor over time was not always the easiest job. There were a lot of assassinations. Some of them actually just quit to go live in monasteries because the job was just too tough. But Emperor Justinian here is known as one of the greatest Byzantine emperors. He rules the Byzantine Empire during its golden age, right, during its high point. Again, it comes pretty much within 50 years of the fall of Rome, from 527 to 565. Now, Justinian is the emperor as Rome had just collapsed. And he was one of those guys that had it in his mind that he was going to reunite the entire empire. And he was going to get the old Western Roman Empire part, what is today France, part of Great Britain, Spain. He was going to get everything. He was going to be a new Caesar. He was going to revive the ideas of Julius and Augustus Caesar. But this takes a lot of time. His best generals just couldn't do it. He lost thousands of soldiers and almost bankrupted his treasury trying to conquer the old Western Roman Empire. And try as he might, he just couldn't do it. It was too wild, it was too remote, and he was meeting opposition there from what will become known as the office of the Pope. Now, one of the great stories about Emperor Justinian is his wife Theodora. And as he was coming back into the city one day, he sees this dancing girl doing her rockette routine, and he's like, whoa, let me go check this out. And Theodora had been born a very low-class peasant, and so when she gets the chance, the greatest opportunity in the world for her, she marries the emperor and becomes his queen. And Theodora was a tough lady. Very early on, there's a small rebellion, and his advisors are advising Justinian to flee. And she's like, oh my God, you bunch of mamby-pamby wimpy guys. Here, give me a sword. I'll go put down this rebellion. You got to go out there, and you got to hit them hard, and they'll stop. And when Theodora went out to put down the rebellion, Justinian kind of grows his spinal column and goes out and puts it down. With Theodora as his advisor, she became a political advisor, strong enough to challenge her husband. She was an ambassador, a diplomat, forming treaties. And she went out and built hospitals and churches, especially in the poor areas, never forgetting where she came from. And she was an advocate for women's rights way back when women did not have a very large role. Now, unfortunately, she dies. She was younger than Justinian, and she dies from what we believe may be cancer. He becomes very depressed. In the latter part of his reign, he just kind of almost flounders, is the point that I will make. He's just not the same without his great queen, Theodora. But while she's there, Justinian and Theodora do some pretty good things. One of the things that Justinian did do was he wanted to get rid of all the contradictory and out-of-date laws from the entire Roman Empire. So he brings together a group of scholars, and he wants to create a modern, single, uniform set of laws that will, one, be smooth and efficient, and two, augment his power. And it's known as the Corpus Juris Civilis, or the body of common law, or sometimes Justinian's Code. All right, we're going to get rid of all the laws that are contradictory. We're going to choose the ones we want. We're going to streamline it, and it's these laws that will run the Byzantine Empire. He got the best thinkers, judges, philosophers in order to do this. Now, the Corpus Juris Civilis only partially helps Justinian. Where it really becomes big is later on in the nation-building era of Europe, like, when England and France become countries, and even the modern day come from the Corpus Juris Civilis. And not only did they write these laws down, but they actually wrote a textbook used to guide future lawmakers on how to do all of this. And Justinian's Code was comprehensive. It kind of gauged and governed all aspects of someone's life, from disbursement of property, how slavery should be run, marriage and divorce, to criminals' justice, to the government. Justinian, it was a pretty forward-thinking goal way back at his time. So we're going to skip a little bit of Justinian's Code here, and we're going to get to Justinian's construction projects. Knowing that there were wars with Western Europe and the barbarians coming, he helped build a 14-mile wall to protect Constantinople from invaders. You can see some of it is still there, and he also enlarges the empire by building aqueducts, courts of laws, and schools. So one of the many things that the Byzantine Empire made a lot of contribution in is, number one, mosaic art. You can see right here. Number two, enlarging the Roman arch to make wider, taller, bigger, more powerful structures, and flattening out the dome, as we can see here in the Hagia Sophia. Had been an Eastern Orthodox church. Now it is an Islamic Mosque, and its name means holy wisdom. He builds schools. He builds libraries. Pretty much all of these things were important because Constantinople will become a repository of Greco-Roman law. A lot of the works going back from Greece, even to mathematical theories and engineering from ancient Egypt, used to be housed in Alexander the Great's House of Muses and other places. Well, all of that learning was brought over to Constantinople. And the Byzantine, the Hebrew, and the Islamic scholars will keep it alive when Western Europe falls into its dark ages for 600 years. From the fall of Rome to the Renaissance, it was this area, again, the Byzantine, the Hebrew, and the Islamic scholars, that will keep this learning alive and allow it to be retransfused back into Europe during the Renaissance. But Justinian was not always the well-liked guy, this great emperor. Again, a lot of it was due to his wife, but he was very strict, and his punishments were very harsh. He did not play around. He had a saying, one God, one empire, one religion. And again, he's controlling this large, multi-ethnic, multicultural empire on parts of 3 different continents. Trying to unite them and keep everybody happy was not always easy. So when it came time to drop the hammer, he dropped the hammer. So one of the things that will help lead to the eventual fall of the Byzantine Empire, which we'll get to in a little bit, was this is the first instance of what we will get what will become known as the Black Death. A plague will break out in the later years of Justinian's reign that will bear some similarities with the great plagues that will happen later on. In 542, right near the latter part of his reign, 10,000 people in the empire died a day. So the Byzantine Empire is using a lot of its population. And it needed that population to remain strong, because one of the problems the Byzantine Empire is going to suffer is they're going to get into a lot of ongoing and very costly wars. They're still trying to kill the Pope or reconquer the Western Roman Empire. They're fighting in ancient Persia with the Sassanid Empire, and coming out of the south is a new opponent, the growth and the spread of Islam. So we're going to get a series of years where the Byzantine Empire is getting attacked from the east, sometimes from the south, while fighting with the west. And the Byzantine emperors, the guys after Justinian, will use every trick in the book. They will arrange political marriages. Sometimes they will form treaties. They will even use cash and sometimes just brute force, physical military power to keep their enemies at bay. In 1090, Emperor Comnenus is even forced to ask European Western Roman Catholic Pope Urban II for help launching the First Crusade. Pope Urban does so, hoping to heal the fracture between the two churches. The only problem with him is that not only did the fracture not close, it actually got wider. But the First Crusade is, militarily at least, the only successful crusade. The others were losses. In 1453, the great city of Constantinople will fall to the Ottoman Turks. Emperor Mehmed II will come in and end the Byzantine Empire. And so the reign of the Byzantine Empire, as we're going to go back and use Justinian as our example. The Byzantine Empire was seen as the sole ruler with 100% authority. He was seen as the co-ruler of Jesus on the earth. and helping them maintain power for another 1,000 years practically after the Roman Empire fell, is that the church and the state were deeply intertwined and connected. Some differences between the Roman Catholic Church and the Eastern Orthodox Church, while they may seem small to some, they're very big, especially back at this time. Number one, in the Eastern Orthodox Church, there is no pope. The emperor is the head of the church, and he can select or appoint a minister of the church, the patriarch of Constantinople, who is the head of the church below the emperor. He is the secretary of religion, so to speak, that will carry out and make sure the church is doing what the emperor wants. The church will dictate and control the lives of its followers, where in Rome, the Pope did that. In the Eastern Orthodox Church, priests could marry and have families. In the Roman Catholic Church, they could not. In the Eastern Orthodox Church, they could use leavened bread for communion, where the Roman Catholic Church, the old Judaic tradition, used unleavened bread. But the big one, besides the Pope, is the use of icons. Byzantine Emperor Leo III will forbid the use of icons. The iconoclastic controversy, the statues and a lot of the frescoes are pulled out of the Eastern Orthodox churches. Even some of the mosaics are gone. This great works of art are destroyed or pulled out. And this really makes a lot of not only Eastern Orthodox but Roman Catholics angry, leading eventually to the Great Schism of 1054, the splitting between the Eastern and the Western churches. The orange or red there is Roman Catholic. The blue will be Eastern Orthodox, a permanent splitting between the churches that will be one of the reasons for the Byzantine Empire collapsing. So, once again, though, Constantinople did throughout its history remain this repository of Hellenistic culture, things created by Alexander the Great, the Greek, the Egyptian, Persian, Indian, and even Roman influence. It will help Western Europe out of the Dark Ages and sponsor a lot of cultural diffusion, especially along the Great Silk Road trade routes. And something that will be heavily influenced by the Byzantine Empire is the modern country of Russia. Starting today in what would be the Ukraine, this very large, wide open prairie that in the north will give way to great forests and mountains. And Russia, in square mileage, is the biggest country on the earth, really giving, credence to validity to the word Eurasia. And so settling there, in what would eventually become the city of Kiev, are a Slavic people, a language root that will begin to settle between 700 and 800, right between the times of the great Western Roman leaders Charles Martel and Charlemagne. They will settle here in the Ukraine. Eventually, the Vikings, with their unique shipbuilding technology, will begin to penetrate deep into the rivers of Europe with their boats that were flexible and had that shallow draft I told you about. And they come down to Kiev, where they begin to assimilate and work with the Russian people. Now, the great waterways and access to the Black Sea allowed these Russians to form a trade link with the city of Constantinople during the heyday of the Byzantine Empire. Well, in 860, the Byzantine Emperor sent two brother missionaries up into Russia. Their job was to convert the people to Eastern Orthodox Christianity. It is going to take a long time, and one of the things they had to do was to communicate with the people. So they will help create a new written language so people can understand. And this written language, this Cyrillic, you can see, like, our alphabet, A, B, you can C, D, E, F, G, and you can see the same thing in Cyrillic, how different it really is. That's where you get the saying, it's all Greek to me. I have no idea what that is saying. But anyway, this written language will do two things. It will foster education, number one, literacy, and it will help spread the Christian religion, this unity between the Byzantine Empire and Mother Russia. And just as things are getting going well, the Great Mongol Empire is going to explode out of Asia, and one branch of Genghis Khan's army, the Golden Horde, will make it up into Russia in 1236. Now, the Golden Horde were named for the yellow or goldish roofs on their yurts that would reflect the sunlight, and they had converted to Islam. And they roll into Kiev, and they just kill thousands of Russians, burned the city, and they move a capital from there to the modern-day city of Moscow for about 250 years. Now, the Golden Horde were rough, tough conquerors, but once the dust settled, they did rule fairly. It was about, making money and trading. And so some Russian merchants as far away as Eastern Europe will benefit as a new part of the Silk Road will open up. This trade route will connect in to the Silk Road and allow goods and services to flow east and west. Now, the Mongols are going to use Russian nobles, known as boyars, as their tax collectors. And they're like, look, man, you do your job, we'll treat you fairly, you just collect the taxes, but we're not going to look over your shoulder. And some of these tax collectors took a little bit extra. They will form their own personal kingdoms, and some use the money to build a new city. And here they will make it the capital of the Russian Orthodox Church. The Islamic members of the Golden Horde tolerated the Eastern Orthodox Church. They kind of work well together. And as Moscow grows in influence and these small nobles have their tiny little kingdoms, they will just be getting into feudalism where it was dying out in other places, that the Russians in 1380 will kickstart a rebellion. Now, the Mongols were a long way from home. Their numbers had gotten smaller over the years, and the Golden Horde is driven out from Western Russia. And it's going to take time, and one of the guys that will lead the final big push is Ivan III, or Ivan the Great, who will reign from 1462 to 1505. And he helps really drive Russia's ascent to power. But he watched how the Mongols worked. And he said, what I need to do to become the supreme king here is to rule without the nobles. I can't depend upon the boyars because they're corrupt. I'm going to try and do everything myself, which was a very difficult job to be hands-on. But his energy and his vision helped him do it. To help validate his claim as a royal, he will marry the niece of the very last Byzantine emperor and take the title of Tsar, meaning Caesar. So he's tying himself back to the old Western Roman Empire like Julius and Augustus Caesar, and he is eventually seen as almost sort of a demigod. Unfortunately for the people of Russia, his grandson, Ivan IV, or Ivan the Terrible, is a little bit different. He is going to rule like his grandfather. He is going to further centralize the authority and eliminate the nobles from important governmental positions. Instead, he is going to take his loyal supporters and he is going to pay them with land instead of money, because he doesn't have a lot of that, in exchange for military service. So he really begins to grow feudalism when it's dying out elsewhere. Now the problem is you can see him here at a younger age, and the top one is when he begins to have a transformation. All of a sudden he becomes psychotic and violent, and he enjoyed other people's pain, and he creates a black-clad secret police like the Nazgul from Lord of the Rings to eliminate enemies real or imagined, even his own son. So in 1584 he suddenly dies, and this creates a power vacuum in Russia in a war that's called the Time of Troubles. Eventually, a young guy, Michael Romanov, is going to come to power. He's 17 years old, and he will create the Great Romanov dynasty that'll last until 1918. So I was telling you guys about St. Basil's Cathedral. It is just beautiful. Here is St. Basil's on this nice sunny day. You can see the Byzantine influence, the onion-like domes with the green and the blue and kind of the pinkish, brick and marble. Just, a beautiful, gorgeous site there in Moscow. And here again is Moscow. Here's the extent of Russia. Here's Mongolia and where the Golden Horde came from. So that is a quick review, maybe a little bit longer than I liked. Oh my gosh, it's been 28 minutes. So I'll shut up now and I'll add Islam to this here shortly. Have a good day, everyone.